Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Tonight's episode is being recorded on a historic date. It's technically it's Friday the 14th, but last night the Raptors won, and I saw the power of an event to shift the states of being of many. But what I want to speak about specifically is how it's important to play the cards life gives you. And how you play them is the journey itself. That means in every moment of your conscious existence, there's the presence of data. Every moment contains data, yet this data is being engaged through different experiences by each person. There are moments where I feel that existence is being self contained, and that the meaning of the world requires my sense of self to be there first. In those moments, the moment I am an individual in a collective phenomena, which is the existence of the universe, I, in some sense, allow myself infinite dimensions. It happens automatically, pretty much like cutting the pieces of a cake into smaller and smaller chunks. Imagine if you could. It's as if technically, mathematically, the pieces would never end. Do you see? But physically, of course, you can't, you know. So for me, reality seems to have been divided into mind and matter. Mind and matter, the ancient Vedic yogis of Vedic culture, they would say Purusha and Prakriti, the simultaneous being of attention and matter. Your attention is not just on matter, it has arose from a sort of organic matter, you can say. So the biggest question that self-aware creatures have said, they have in some sense asked themselves is, what is this? Why am I here? Why am I seeing this? I feel that's something I shared with my ancestry, even though I was not alive, even though I was not born then, I was not conceived, but I could see that all my ancestors looked at the sky and were like, whoa, we're on a playing field. We're on the playing field called life, you know? And it's honestly, Shakespeare was pretty close. He comprehended the nature of a dualistic reality, both behind and in front of the eyes of man. That means life, in some sense, the stories of life either go towards being comedic, which means infinitely continuing, or they go towards being tragic. And so, what that means is that you are a shape, but you are a temporary shape. And so, the value you for now think as the person in this world is just the physical value. You feel like beauty, physical beauty, most people on this planet feel that they treat it as if it's a divine virtue. But I could tell you, um, even even the non-angelic can be beautiful, but true beauty has a return in its process of view. What that means is that the cards you're given are various moments you find yourself in. Sometimes in these moments you find yourself in, the illusion of the world makes gives you a promise of your future. That means you in your mind look at the world, you see something, and then just the thought of what could happen if there was a sort of uh, uh, your karma was more accessible to you. Let's say not your karma, but let's say there is a sort of hollow beauty and there is an actual beauty. So for living dynamic creatures, the beauty of our truth, the allure of our intelligence leads us towards a state where we have to find a dynamic resolution. And language is not it becomes dynamic in the minds of men, but on its own it is symbols. So it is our intelligence that reads a book and suddenly ink on a paper has meaning somewhere that can't be seen yet is present. That's my personal observation of my imagination, or pretty much what imagination is in the human creature. It is a potential of uh, it's as if like you look at yourself as this biological creature and you're like, okay, so all the data I'm getting is just sensory, right? There's nothing more. But then you see all the sensory data behind your eyes seems to be accumulating and coagulating and reaching a point where identities are born endlessly. So pretty much the human being has reached an evolutionary state, I find, that its mind is living faster than its body, so it has created an elusive world upon the actual world. The intelligence of the observer of reality is it is at a faster, it is vibrating much quicker than the body. You see, for me, it was so unique. It was so unique realizing that every moment has its own unique cards. Or if you want to use another metaphor, every moment visits you differently. I've had days where I've kind of come home at the end of the day and I'm like, okay, let me see what was the general theme of how I experienced the day. Like that's something playful I do sometimes. I wonder what the theme of the experience of the day was, and then it's kind of like a playful challenge for my mind to try to see where the average emotional view is positioned. That means throughout the day, you go through many different emotions based on many different things that occur. And in some sense, at the end of the day, you wonder about the time you live. For me, every night I go to sleep, that's kind of like a free movie. I just sit there and wonder about how the day happened, wonder about how much of the day was retained. I wonder about what came towards me, what went away. And so it's just like there's some things you can't control in life. Like we can create the most incredible technologies, but we can't control like how fast or slow our hair grows. I mean, we can maybe with diet, but like we can't like be like, yo, hair grow faster or hair grow slower. Like, you know what I mean? Like, like it's one of those things where that's just a metaphor. But I'm trying to say that our free will is in actually, it's like we all have free will, but the free will doesn't have free will. Okay, what that means is our galaxy is a tiny circle within a vaster circle of many galaxies. It's a sort of what astonished you in front of your eyes, now its roots are being discovered within you. And when you begin discovering that meaning is an internal generation, and you find yourself in a strange place. Anytime I have too serious of a belief, that belief breaks. It's as if we as creatures are not meant to believe too much. Belief or disbelief. Disbelief is like an indirect way of believing something else. Okay? So for me, I think I hold a unique position because I am telling our species that can only communicate through language that there is something more than language. And the cards that you are given is actually how your mind can receive. It has to do with your experiential openness of what sort of identity or mask has landed on your face to that you're being who you are. And in some sense, of course, life is something that you can't overanalyze as well. So then, how far can the intellectual search for truth go? And I feel that it can't go beyond duality. Because beyond duality, there's no language, there's no world. Exists as a technology to, in some sense, be able to be a bridge between the external and internal dimensions of life. However, language, um, once you move beyond duality, that's when like you can't be a being of uh, non macrocosmic presence. You see, guys, this whole enlightenment thing in India, I kind of looked at it, and the way I comprehended it, like I feel the way I solved that Rubik's Cube was I noticed that all the teachings in these ancient mystical books are suggesting that the person doesn't go towards materiality. Like in a lot of religious contexts, there's a sort of idea that the being is eternal, yet it is in some sort of cycle. For example, Hinduism and Buddhism share that. They share this sort of notion that it's like this eternity, but this eternity is confused, so it's stuck in this temporal loop of karma, you know? And so for me, it's like the karma ignites through the intention of the attention. That means when you really go discover your true nature, you will actually be taken to silence. And silence is a very chaotic thing to confront because there's no longer any words needed for it. There's no longer anything required to be added to that to the silence for it to be silence. But for many words to continue for many words to exist, we require we require our attention to constantly fall upon it. And I'll tell you, everybody, regardless of how well they do in whatever field or skill, let me tell you, everybody has paid attention to the how they are being themselves in every moment, and they tend to do it through the luxury of a story. And this story is not bad. Some people I speak to, certain New Age people, and they feel like, you know, I tell them that they feel like the ego is a imposter of like kind of like denying them their life. But I'm also saying the ego took 4 billion years to establish. That means, you know what the problem of violence is? It destroys what took eons to be built. It is careless. It is the lack of recognition that like that's the state where I call you find heaven on earth. You find heaven on earth because you have accepted earth like you have accepted heaven. You see? And what heaven is the unknown. And what earth is the known. Heaven and hell can also be seen states of mind. That means if I was having a conversation with Carl Jung, I'd tell him heaven is the unconscious. Earth is the conscious mind. And hell is the lack of the conscious to be able to acknowledge. When you think you know it all, it is a sort of living in a box. So I'll tell you, those people who think they know it all, rather than realizing it's more than people knowing or combating through knowledge. It's more about collaborative exploration through different degrees of wilderness. The world has a lot to teach because primarily all your symbology arises mainly from your visual senses. So one can say language is a relationship between sensory perception and all that it has led to. You know, there was a time where I looked at history and I wondered if destiny was real. And I began seeing patterns in history. But then I wondered if those patterns were from my mind. That means, what if I was looking for the same thing in all things? And then eventually I came to this point that knowledge is a tool, but if you don't know what to build, you have no use for the tool. If you can't incorporate the knowledge, or the certain knowledge you get does not accelerate your life, then in some sense, your free will is pretty much in the passenger seat. So that's the thing. All the animals, all the species on this planet, they're in the passenger seat. Nature is moving a lot of itself. Yet human beings seem to be that part of nature that, for certain amounts in their waking life, they in some sense can come in the driver's seat. And this is why I'm saying, guys, the value of life has been forgotten. This is what you say. Uh, the soul of the world has been forgotten, and the soul of the world was the iridescence of a sort of recognition that it is pure bliss, pure joy, pure completion, pure perfection to have the moment in the first place. For me, one thing I regret in this life, which at least my uh, the thought of me regrets, is that I did not see the true value of many moments that I was alive. I think what dictates a successful life is how aware the person was in every moment of their being, how much they saw the actual world that was here, not the world that they were spoon fed since childhood. There is a sort of weird thing going on in society where children are born trusting. They like, if you look at what's happening, what the story of civilization seems to be at least heading towards, it's as if are children are in some sense born trusting the parents or the family structure they're raised in. As they step out of this family structure, it's as if they deny the same level of comfort that they have at home in how being present. And it becomes one of those things where what you don't trust, you start being dishonest with. Okay? And the reason most people, they you can say a person can dislike another person because that person reminds them of, it's like an honesty that's not being abided. There's a sort of inner landscape that fills up morality based on how your mind can generate itself as a character in the world. We are storytellers, and in our stories, we are telling stories. It is a multidimensional palace, this existence. But this multidimensional palace has a sort of throne, has a sort of center to the earth. For what else could there be for the earth? In some sense, you live a life on the surface, then you live a life in the depths. Then you come back to the world, and you have attained enough wisdom and experience to now listen to life. Rabindranath Tagore, this Indian polymath, and evidently Einstein met Rabindranath Tagore too. He was this genius, this poetic kind of mathematical genius, this Indian man, Rabindranath Tagore. And Rabindranath Tagore, in his poetry, he says something. He says, I woke up. Okay, wait, let me find the actual quote. He says, okay, here. Rabindranath Tagore has this quote where he says, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted and behold, service was joy. And any being who understands this sentence will realize why I am giving these talks. Because the value in life is not just what your body receives, but how your mind walks in this whole place. How you walk is more important than how how others are suggesting you should walk. That's it. Most people have to realize the value of life is also has a personal dimension where you're here to kind of see what you are. Think of it this way: you're an attributeless moment of attention. Within this attributeless moment of attention, or you can even say field, what occurs is various uh, moments of manifestation and change. That means something has to not change to notice change. We all have noticed change, and our bodies are defined by change, but there still seems to be some witness within. That's the pure consciousness, the witness within. In ancient spiritual cultures, this was acknowledged because imagination was not denied for truth to be seen. It was a permission. That means the more you went closer to truth, it was a sort of uh, roller coaster ride into an abidance through realization. That's advanced. That's like what a lot of animals, even if they arose to our level of consciousness, could not comprehend. That we were able to step out of the ideas of the ape and become a sort of solar humanity, SOULAR. The solar humanity has not forgotten nature and yet has not exiled technology. It has given itself an ability to just hear out the moment. Imagine a friend was saying something, or let's say you go somewhere and you see somebody has dropped a vase that was very important to you. And so you get angry, let's say it was an antique or something, and you get angry and that rage comes in. But imagine you were like, okay, and then that guy was like, okay, yo man, hear me out, you know. And so you suddenly see when you allow your attention not to think it's God, you can never get angry because you know there is the others. You know there is others in this world. You know, I like when even it right now, like we dream, we wake up, we continue. No longer there is a dream. No longer there is anything to wake up to. The unknown speaks. We wait for the unknown to speak. I remember hearing Sadhguru, this yogi, They asked him about Mahasamadhi, which is this sort of enlightened way to leave the body, the physical body, through yogic tradition. It's a unique state of samadhi. It's the great samadhi. It is the acceptance of the universe and its finale. Anyways, there is anger in this world, and this anger arises when the inner reality does not. Sorry for the disturbance, guys. I don't know what to say aside from anger brings itself great blindness, and it brings blindness because it feels it knows better. Whenever you suddenly are in a dynamic where you present yourself as a, when you feel the world you see as the only world, you become a raging fool. But when you can see the layers of reality and how there is a certain amount of conscious data. Sorry, guys, I gotta pause this and probably start a part